Cheating ex wants to reunite with beautiful wife, but she's living the dream with a billionaire. Prepare to immerse yourself in a tale of heartbreak, betrayal, and redemption. It all begins when Nicholas Parker, once the devoted husband of the radiant Evelyn Martin, makes a fateful mistake that shatters their marriage. Now, years later, he's desperate to win her back. The catch: Evelyn has found solace and a dream life in the arms of a wealthy millionaire, Alexander Sinclair. How did Nicholas betray the love of his life? Why is he suddenly determined to mend what's broken? And will Evelyn risk everything for the man who once broke her heart? Sit tight. The answers will leave you breathless. It was a crisp autumn evening in the picturesque town of Oakwood Hills when the final threads of Nicholas Parker and Evelyn Martin's marriage began to unravel. The vibrant oranges and reds of the falling leaves belied the storm gathering in their once warm and loving home. For years, friends and neighbors had admired them. Nicholas, a rising star in the local financial firm, and Evelyn, an aspiring interior designer with a penchant for creating cozy, welcoming spaces. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple, until the night everything changed. That evening, Evelyn was in the kitchen, preparing a comforting meal of creamy soup and fresh bread. She couldn't shake the feeling that Nicholas was growing distant. He had barely spoken a word all week and seemed more distracted than usual. Financial stress, she thought. After all, his job demanded long hours and late nights, and a wave of layoffs had made the atmosphere at the office tense. When Nicholas came through the door, he murmured a brief greeting, avoiding her gaze. Though it was a tiny gesture, Evelyn sensed something was off. After dinner, she found him in the study, slouched in his chair with an air of guilt about him. With gentle concern, she asked if something was wrong. He responded with a heavy sigh, and in a trembling voice confessed that he'd been seeing someone else. Evelyn's world seemed to collapse in on itself. Time froze as she tried to process the words. Nicholas had cheated on her. The once sturdy foundation of their marriage, built over years of shared laughter and whispered promises, was crumbling before her eyes. She remembered every small moment she had cherished. The day he proposed beneath the willow tree by the lake, how they slow danced in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, the whispered, "I love you," at night. And now all of it felt like a terrible lie. Nicholas claimed it was a one-time mistake. An impulsive fling with a colleague named Simone, who had recently joined his team. He insisted it happened when he was feeling vulnerable and unappreciated. Work stress, he said, was pushing him to the edge. Evelyn's shock quickly gave way to anger, and that anger to devastating heartbreak. In one single admission, Nicholas had upended her entire life. They fought bitterly. Doors slammed, tears were shed, and painful words were exchanged that night. Finally, Evelyn's voice trembled as she asked the dreaded question, "Do you love her?" Nicholas looked down, unable to meet her eyes, and mumbled that he didn't know. In that moment, Evelyn realized she couldn't stay in that house, couldn't share the same bed with a man who wasn't sure if he loved another woman. Before dawn, she packed a suitcase, threw it in her battered old sedan, and drove off, uncertain if she would ever return. The streetlights guided her down the quiet roads of Oakwood Hills, illuminating the first steps of a journey that would change her life forever. In the weeks that followed her departure, Evelyn tried to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She sought refuge in her friend Rebecca Jennings's spare bedroom. Rebecca, a kind-hearted nurse with an ever-ready listening ear, welcomed Evelyn with open arms and no judgment. The moment Evelyn arrived on Rebecca's doorstep, her tear-streaked face told the whole story. Without a word, Rebecca pulled her friend into a hug and assured her she could stay as long as she needed. Evelyn was grateful, but found the days blurred with a dull ache. She tried to distract herself with job applications, determined to get her interior design business off the ground. Every day she combed through local listings, emailing potential clients or dropping off proposals at real estate agencies that might need staging services. On some afternoons, she sat with Rebecca in the living room, quietly sipping tea while the TV droned on in the background, yet the questions kept coming. Would she remain married to Nicholas? Should she initiate divorce proceedings? Part of her still loved him despite his betrayal, but the humiliation and pain were too raw for her to consider forgiveness. Meanwhile, Nicholas tried reaching out, calling Evelyn repeatedly and leaving voicemails. He claimed he was sorry, that he'd made a mistake, one he would regret for the rest of his life. But for Evelyn, those words sounded hollow. She had sacrificed so much to support his career, late nights listening to him vent about office politics, weekends of cancelled plans when he had to catch up on work, quietly understanding whenever he brought stress home. This was her reward. Her emotional turmoil bled into her sense of self-worth. She stared at her reflection in Rebecca's bathroom mirror, noticing how tired and worn she looked. Where was the vibrant, hopeful woman who once believed in forever after? Some nights she was haunted by images of Nicholas with Simone, laughing together, maybe even saying the same sweet nothings he once whispered to Evelyn. It crushed her spirit. One day, Rebecca gently nudged Evelyn into accompanying her to the farmer's market. At first, Evelyn resisted, not in the mood for friendly chatter or the bustle of people, but eventually she agreed, realizing she had to start somewhere. As they strolled through the colorful stalls, the fresh air and warm smiles of vendors offered a fragile sense of hope. She bought a small potted succulent, a symbol, she decided, of new beginnings. Like the succulent, she would learn to survive on minimal nourishment, find resilience in the harshest conditions, and eventually bloom. That evening, while resting on the couch, Evelyn received a bouquet of flowers at Rebecca's door, an apology from Nicholas. The note attached read, "I will do anything to earn your forgiveness. Please let me show you." She stared at the flowers, torn between a flicker of her old love and the fresh sting of betrayal. She decided she needed space. Nicholas might have been willing to fight for their marriage, but Evelyn still wasn't sure if she was. A month later, on a rare day when Evelyn felt strong enough to face the world, she decided to attend a charity art gala in downtown Oakwood Hills. Rebecca had encouraged her, saying it was a good networking opportunity. Evelyn's dream was to meet potential clients, maybe wealthy homeowners who would want a budding interior designer to transform their spaces. Though it took all her courage to dress up and walk into a room filled with strangers, she mustered a small smile and slipped on a simple but elegant navy blue dress. The gala was held in a restored Victorian mansion, now converted into an event hall. Its grand chandelier sparkled with gold light, illuminating portraits and abstract paintings on the walls. All around, people mingled, chatting about everything from the local economy to the latest art exhibit. Feeling a bit nervous, Evelyn kept to the edges of the room, admiring the paintings while sipping a glass of white wine. That was when she first locked eyes with Alexander Sinclair. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, he exuded an aura of quiet confidence. He noticed her studying a painting of a lonely boat at sea. Stepping forward, he gently asked, "What do you see when you look at it?" Evelyn was startled at first. No one had approached her like that in a while. But something about his genuine curiosity put her at ease. They introduced themselves, and Evelyn learned he was the founder of Sinclair Ventures, a real estate investment firm that specialized in luxury properties. She immediately saw a chance to talk about her work. Alexander listened attentively as she described her passion for designing spaces that told a story, that evoked emotion. He asked questions, showed genuine interest in her vision. It was as if, for the first time in months, someone saw beyond her heartbreak and recognized her talent. They spent the rest of the evening discussing art, architecture, and life. Alexander shared his own background. He'd grown up modestly, a far cry from his current status as a millionaire, and worked tirelessly to build his empire. Evelyn, in turn, confessed the recent turmoil in her personal life, albeit in vague terms. She felt strangely comfortable revealing fragments of her heartbreak because Alexander listened without judgment. Before the night ended, he offered her a business card. "I have several properties that could use a fresh touch," he said. "Perhaps we could arrange a meeting." There was a sparkle in his eyes that made Evelyn's heart flutter. But she pushed that feeling aside, reminding herself she was still entangled in a messy separation. As she left the gala, Evelyn clutched the card in her hand. She felt a faint thrill, an unfamiliar rush of excitement. Alexander Sinclair was not just a potential client. He was charming, successful, and seemed genuinely kind. She hadn't felt this alive in a long time. Staring up at the starry sky, Evelyn wondered if life was about to give her a second chance. Not just professionally, but perhaps in matters of the heart. The following week, Evelyn found herself in a whirlwind of emails and phone calls with Alexander's assistant. They arranged an official meeting at Sinclair Ventures. Evelyn spent hours perfecting her portfolio, carefully selecting photos of her past design projects. Though she had only a handful, each showcased her meticulous attention to detail and flair for transforming bland spaces into something warm and inviting. On the day of the appointment, she walked into a sleek glass building downtown. The lobby was designed with polished marble floors and enormous indoor plants that lent a touch of nature to the corporate environment. A friendly receptionist directed her to the 25th floor, where she would meet Alexander and his team. Inside the meeting room, the walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of Oakwood Hills. Alexander greeted her personally, introducing her to a couple of his top executives. Evelyn gave her presentation, outlining how she would approach designing for Sinclair Ventures' upcoming luxury condominiums. She highlighted her belief that a home should be both visually stunning and functionally comfortable, a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. As she spoke, she noticed Alexander's unwavering gaze. He was not just hearing her words, he was truly listening, his eyes reflecting admiration for her creativity. His team asked several probing questions, and Evelyn answered them calmly, her confidence building with each passing minute. When the meeting ended, one of his executives gave a nod of approval, signaling that they wanted to work with her. Overjoyed, Evelyn felt like she was walking on air. Alexander escorted her out of the conference room, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "I'm delighted you could meet with us," he said. "I think this partnership will be quite successful." There was a pause as he studied her. "Would you like to continue this conversation over dinner?" Strictly professional, of course. A part of Evelyn hesitated. The last thing she needed was more complications. Yet she also knew that forging a good relationship with Alexander, her first major client, could be crucial for her fledgling business. "That would be nice," she finally replied, offering him a polite smile. That evening, they dined at Primrose, an upscale French restaurant adorned with soft lighting and elegant decor. Between bites of delicate salmon and expertly prepared risotto, they discussed contract details, timelines, and potential marketing strategies. But inevitably, conversation drifted toward personal matters. Alexander shared more about his humble beginnings, how he once dreamed of simply finding a steady job. Building a financial empire was never the end goal. It just happened as he chased opportunities. He'd lost friends along the way, some to envy, others to misunderstandings. Money and success, he explained, could isolate you if you weren't careful. Evelyn, in turn, revealed bits of her own story, how she'd studied design, her early marriage to Nicholas, and the heartbreak that led her to this new chapter in her life. Alexander listened intently, offering neither pity nor judgment. Something about his sincerity drew her in. By the time dessert arrived, they were laughing at a silly anecdote about a mishap in one of his properties. Later, as he walked her to a waiting cab, he lightly touched her arm. "I know you're going through a lot," he said gently, "but I believe in second chances, professionally and personally." Evelyn's cheeks warmed. She wasn't sure she was ready for anything beyond the professional realm, but a small spark of curiosity glowed within her. Could Alexander Sinclair be more than just a client? Evelyn's business with Sinclair Ventures took off more smoothly than she could have imagined. Within a month, she had secured a contract to design model condos and oversee the interior aesthetics for a series of high-end residential properties. She worked tirelessly, drafting sketches, curating color palettes, selecting furniture pieces that spoke luxury yet offered comfort. The more she collaborated with Alexander, the more she discovered how seamlessly they worked together. He valued her input, often praising her creativity in front of his team, which bolstered her self-esteem like never before. Yet for all her newfound success, whispers of the past lingered in the corners of her mind. Nicholas would still call her, leaving voicemails filled with remorse. She'd occasionally answer, keeping the conversation brief, but his voice evoked a swirl of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, and a twinge of longing for what they once had. In the midst of it all, she found herself enjoying Alexander's company more and more. Despite her attempts to keep things purely professional, they began meeting outside of work, a quick coffee before a meeting, a late-night stroll after a long day. It was as if something magnetic was drawing them closer. One weekend, Alexander invited her to view a sprawling estate in neighboring Crescent Bay. "This place is special," he said, guiding her through the ornate gardens and breathtaking ocean views. Evelyn marveled at the Italian-style villa, replete with marble floors and frescoed ceilings, yet it was the sense of tranquility that truly captured her heart. Standing with Alexander on a balcony overlooking the sea, she felt a gentle breeze brush against her hair. For a moment she almost forgot the pain Nicholas had caused. However, just when things seemed perfect, reality intruded. One afternoon, Evelyn received an unexpected visitor at Rebecca's home, Simone, the colleague with whom Nicholas had cheated. Simone, with her elegant posture and polished look, asked to speak privately. Evelyn's heart pounded. Why on earth would Simone want to see her? In the living room, Simone confessed that Nicholas was in a downward spiral since Evelyn left. He had quit his job, lost weight, and was barely functioning. "I thought I meant something to him," Simone said, her voice tinged with regret. "But it's clear he's devastated over losing you. I don't think he ever really wanted me. He's been begging me to help him get you back." Evelyn's emotions tangled into knots. Hearing about Nicholas's suffering didn't bring her relief. It only reignited old pains. She recalled the countless nights she had supported him, how she had remained faithful, only to be betrayed in the end. Simone's visit felt like an intrusion into her attempts to move on. That night, she found herself on the phone with Nicholas, tears threatening to spill. "Why did you do this to us?" she demanded, her voice cracking. Nicholas admitted he'd been stupid, that he didn't even know what he was looking for when he stumbled into the affair. "It was a moment of weakness," he pleaded. "I love you. I've always loved you." Though her heart ached, Evelyn told Nicholas she was forging ahead with her new life. Simone's words had left her conflicted. She felt pity for him, but she also knew she couldn't simply erase the betrayal. After hanging up, she stared at her bedroom ceiling, torn between compassion for a man she once loved and the cautious, hopeful stirrings she felt toward Alexander Sinclair. As the weeks went by, Evelyn poured herself into work, hosting presentations for prospective buyers at the newly designed model condos. Each space reflected her style, clean lines softened by cozy textures, subtle color palettes enriched by accents of bold hues. The result was sophisticated yet inviting, and word spread that Sinclair Ventures had found a remarkable designer. Alexander couldn't hide his pride. At company events, he introduced her as the design mastermind behind their success. Their rapport was more than professional. After hours, they'd share quiet dinners or long walks, where Alexander would open up about his past relationships. He confessed he had once been engaged to a woman who broke it off after realizing she couldn't handle his fast-paced lifestyle. "It taught me that success can be lonely if you don't share it with someone who understands," he told Evelyn. She felt a pang of empathy. Her own marriage had broken under different circumstances, but the result was the same: heartbreak. One evening, after a successful unveiling of a penthouse suite, Alexander invited her to a small after-party with a few business associates. Dressed in a sleek cocktail dress, Evelyn felt a surge of confidence. However, amid the festivities, she received a text from Nicholas. "We need to talk. It's urgent." Her heart raced. Was this another attempt to guilt her into returning? Unable to ignore the sense of urgency, she excused herself and stepped outside to call him back. Nicholas's voice was somber. "I'm at the hospital," he said quietly. "My father had a stroke. Please, Evelyn, he asked for you." She knew Nicholas's father, Roger Parker, had always treated her like family. A wave of concern and responsibility washed over her. Whatever her issues with Nicholas, she couldn't turn her back on the man who once called her his favorite daughter-in-law. Evelyn apologized to Alexander and rushed to the hospital. In the waiting room, she found Nicholas pacing nervously. Their eyes met, heavy with unspoken words. He drew her into a brief hug, and for a split second she remembered the warmth that once existed between them. They went in to see Roger together. The older man's face brightened when he spotted Evelyn, and he squeezed her hand. "I'm so sorry for everything, sweetheart," Roger croaked. "I've been a poor excuse for a father, letting Nicholas drift away from you." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. Roger had never truly intervened in their marriage troubles, but she appreciated his remorse. Nicholas stood by the bed, silent and grim. Evelyn spent that night in the hospital, comforting Roger and discussing his treatment with the doctor. In the hallway, Nicholas would glance at her, longing in his eyes. She tried to remain composed, but she couldn't help recalling the life they once shared. Holidays with family, nights spent laughing over board games. Now, everything was fractured. When morning came, Roger was stable. Evelyn prepared to leave, exhaustion weighing her down. Nicholas followed her to the parking lot. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. It meant a lot to him, and to me. Evelyn nodded, her heart conflicted. Memories of their marriage resurfaced in a jumble of happiness and pain. As she drove away, she felt an unexpected ache for what they had lost. But thoughts of Alexander, with his unwavering support and genuine interest in her dreams, kept her from diving too deep into nostalgia. She wasn't sure what her heart wanted, only that she couldn't keep straddling the past and the future forever. The confrontation between her old life and her new one weighed heavily on Evelyn in the days that followed. She found herself hesitating whenever Alexander asked her out for dinner or a weekend getaway. Part of her longed for the comforting sense of possibility he offered, yet her lingering attachments to Nicholas and the guilt she felt about Roger's condition held her back. Rebecca noticed Evelyn's turmoil. One evening, they sat at Rebecca's kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of red wine between them. "I can see you're torn," Rebecca said softly. "You care for Nicholas's family. You care about Nicholas too in some way. But Alexander, he seems to be lifting you up in ways Nicholas never did. You owe it to yourself to be happy." Evelyn sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "I'm not sure I'm ready to jump into something new, especially after the trauma of betrayal, but Alexander has been so patient, so understanding." She set her glass down. "What if I'm rushing? What if I'm being unfair to both men?" Rebecca reached for her hand. "Love is complicated. You're allowed to take your time, but don't let guilt over Nicholas's mistakes trap you in the past." At work, Alexander sensed Evelyn's reticence. He gently approached her one afternoon, after a meeting. "I can tell you've been distant. I don't want to pressure you, but if there's something on your mind, I'm here to listen." His eyes were filled with concern. Evelyn found herself unloading her worries, Nicholas's father's stroke, her unresolved feelings, and her confusion about starting something new. Alexander listened without interruption, then gently said, "I'll be here for you, whether as a friend or more, whenever you're ready." Days later, Evelyn visited Roger in the hospital, bringing homemade chicken soup and a warm blanket. Nicholas was there too, sitting by his father's side. They chatted about Roger's therapy schedule and the exercises he would need once discharged. Nicholas seemed genuinely grateful for Evelyn's presence, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like old times, like they were a team again. When she turned to leave, Nicholas followed her out to the hallway. "Evelyn, I know I messed up," he began, voice quavering. "But I swear, if you give me another chance, I'll spend every moment proving to you that I'm worthy." She looked at him, seeing the sorrow etched in his face. This was not the confident, ambitious man she once knew. He was broken, remorseful. Part of her wanted to comfort him, to mend his shattered spirit. Yet the memory of his betrayal still stung. "I need time," she managed to say. "I can't just forget everything that happened." Nicholas nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I understand," he whispered. "I'll wait for as long as it takes." That night, Evelyn lay awake in bed. She stared at the ceiling, replaying Nicholas's pleas in her mind, recalling Alexander's unwavering support. Was it possible to forgive someone who had caused such deep pain? And if forgiveness were possible, did it mean returning to that person's arms? Or was it time to embrace a new future with someone who had never betrayed her trust? Though her heart was still tender, the seeds of a decision began to take root. Around this time, an unexpected visitor showed up at Evelyn's workplace. Simone. Evelyn was in the middle of examining fabric swatches in a quiet corner of Sinclair Ventures' design department when Simone tapped her on the shoulder. The tension was palpable. After all, Simone's affair with Nicholas had shattered Evelyn's marriage. "I need to talk," Simone said, her voice subdued. She looked different, eyes puffy, posture slumped. Gone was the polished confidence that Evelyn had seen before. Warily, Evelyn led her to a private conference room. Once inside, Simone took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for things to get so far. I thought Nicholas was as lonely as I was, but I realized now I was just a distraction for him, or maybe he was a distraction for me. Either way, I regret the pain I caused." Evelyn folded her arms. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her: anger, pity, sadness. "I don't know what you expect me to say," she replied carefully. Simone wrung her hands. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just needed to apologize, and to let you know that I've resigned from the company we worked at. I want nothing more to do with Nicholas or that environment." Though Evelyn bristled at the reminder of the affair, she also saw that Simone was genuinely remorseful. Perhaps holding on to hatred would serve no purpose but to keep Evelyn stuck in the past. Taking a slow breath, she said, "I appreciate your apology, but I hope you understand that healing, both for me and Nicholas, will take time." Simone nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I really am sorry," she repeated, then left, leaving Evelyn with a strange sense of closure she hadn't expected. That evening, Evelyn met with her old friend and mentor, Marcus Leonard, an established interior designer in Oakwood Hills. Over coffee, Evelyn confided her emotional turmoil. Marcus had known Nicholas for years, having once helped him plan a surprise birthday party for Evelyn. "People make mistakes," Marcus said, sipping his cappuccino, "but there's a difference between a mistake and a pattern. You know Nicholas better than anyone else. Only you can decide if he's truly changed." Buoyed by Marcus's words, Evelyn attended another property launch event hosted by Alexander. Surrounded by real estate moguls and potential buyers, she mingled with newfound confidence. Alexander introduced her to several of his associates as the vision behind Sinclair Ventures' interior magic. She beamed, feeling appreciated in ways Nicholas had never quite managed to convey, yet the real test came when Nicholas unexpectedly arrived at the launch event. He'd heard from a mutual friend that Evelyn would be presenting, and in a show of support, or desperation, he showed up, clearly out of place among the polished corporate crowd. Evelyn's heart pounded. Spotting Alexander engaged in conversation with a group of investors, she worried about a confrontation. She approached Nicholas quietly, pulling him aside before he could disrupt her professional setting. "Why are you here?" she whispered. He gestured awkwardly at the lavish decor. I wanted to see you shine," he said, his eyes misty. "I'm proud of you." Torn between wanting to dismiss him and feeling a pang of old tenderness, Evelyn thanked him and asked him to leave. She could see the heartbreak in his expression, but she couldn't allow him to overshadow her moment. As she watched Nicholas exit the venue, her thoughts whirled. Alexander turned then, noticing her distress. Concern filled his gaze. Gently, he placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Is everything all right?" Evelyn forced a small smile. "I'm fine," she lied. But deep down, she knew she was standing on the precipice of a choice that would shape her future. Over the next month, Evelyn found herself increasingly drawn into Alexander's world. He took her to exclusive charity galas, introduced her to key figures in high-end real estate, and even flew her out to a property development conference in New York, where she presented design concepts to an audience of influential investors. Each success reinforced her growing reputation as a formidable interior designer. Despite the glamour, Alexander's life wasn't just cocktail parties and boardroom deals. Late one evening, as they shared a quiet moment overlooking the city skyline from his penthouse balcony, Alexander confided in her about the loneliness he often felt at the top. "People see the money, the success," he murmured, "but they don't see the isolation. I've always longed for someone to share my dreams with, someone who sees me for who I am, not just the man behind Sinclair Ventures." Evelyn felt her heart soften. She had glimpsed Alexander's kindness, his work ethic, and his genuine desire to uplift others. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't forget Nicholas. Her life had once been simple, filled with modest hopes of building a cozy home and a small but fulfilling design business. Now she was hovering on the edge of a bigger stage, one that both dazzled and intimidated her. When she returned to Oakwood Hills after the New York conference, she stopped by to check on Roger Parker. He was home from the hospital, undergoing physical therapy. Seeing him seated in a reclining chair, blanket over his legs, made her chest tighten with sympathy. Nicholas was by his father's side, changing the bedding on a nearby couch. "You're doing a good job taking care of him," Evelyn offered gently. Nicholas, looking weary, managed a sad smile. "I owe him that much," he replied, "and I owe you an apology. Every day, for the rest of my life, if that's what it takes." Roger beckoned Evelyn closer. "Come sit with me, child," he said, patting the armchair next to him. She took a seat, trying to ignore the tension in the room. Roger's voice was hoarse but clear. "I won't pretend to understand everything that happened," he said, "but I do know my son. He loves you deeply. He made the worst mistake of his life, and he knows it." Evelyn blinked away tears. Roger reached out to squeeze her hand. "I only ask that you consider the possibility that people can change. I know Nicholas. If he says he's changed, he's telling the truth. Just give him a chance to prove it." He looked at Nicholas. "I'm not saying you should force her, boy. I'm just asking for understanding." That night, Nicholas walked Evelyn to her car. She could feel his desperation, the intensity of his regret. "I see you with Alexander," he murmured. "I know he can give you things I never could, but I also know I love you more than my own life. That hasn't changed." Evelyn's eyes welled up. "I need time," she repeated, for what felt like the 100th time. Nicholas nodded, tears reflecting in the dim light of the street lamp. "I'll wait," he said again, his voice breaking. As she drove away, Evelyn felt the weight of her decision pressing in from all sides. In Alexander's world, she was flourishing, recognized for her talent. Yet the lingering bond with Nicholas, formed by years of marriage and shared memories, was still a powerful force. The stage was set for a heart-wrenching choice. The only question was which path her heart would lead her down. A fierce storm swept through Oakwood Hills one evening, thunder rattling windows and rain flooding the streets. Inside Rebecca's home, Evelyn watched lightning flash across the sky as her own internal turmoil mirrored the weather outside. She was due to give Alexander her final design proposals for his latest development in 2 days, and he had invited her to dinner after the meeting. An intimate dinner at a secluded lodge, he'd told her. Just the two of us. She couldn't deny the spark between them, Alexander had gone from a sophisticated millionaire client to a man who inspired both admiration and affection. But there was still that nagging, unrelenting guilt, and the persistent calls from Nicholas. The storm intensified. Suddenly the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Evelyn fumbled for her phone to light a candle. In the flickering glow, she saw her phone screen illuminate with a call from Nicholas. Against her better judgment, she answered. Nicholas's voice was tense. "Can I come over?" he asked. "This storm is killing my nerves, and I just need to see you." Before she could respond, the call dropped. She stared at her phone, uncertain. She knew letting him come over was a risk, yet she also felt an odd tug of concern. Nicholas had never been good with storms. He grew up in a rural area where tornado warnings were common, and the fear remained with him into adulthood. Within half an hour, Nicholas was at the door, drenched from the rain. Rebecca was out working a night shift, so the house was quiet except for the pounding of rain against the windows. Evelyn let him in, handing him a towel to dry off. They sat on the couch, candles flickering around them, and for the first time in months, simply talked. Nicholas apologized again, explaining how he had felt overshadowed by her growing dreams and accomplishments. He confessed he feared losing her respect, and in a moment of weakness sought validation from someone else. Listening to his confession under the dim candlelight, Evelyn felt a mix of anger and pity. She recounted the betrayal's impact on her, how it shattered her trust, how she doubted her own worth afterward. Lightning lit the room for a split second, revealing tears on both their faces. In that brief flare of light, it was as if they were both stripped bare. No lies, no defenses, just two people grappling with the devastation of broken vows. Nicholas hesitantly reached for her hand. She let him hold it, not because she had forgiven him, but because, in that moment, she needed to feel less alone in the storm. "I know you might never forgive me," he whispered. "I just want you to know I'd give anything to go back and undo what I did." The storm raged on, thunder echoing in the distance. Evelyn remained silent, her mind swirling with conflicting feelings. When the power finally returned in the middle of the night, Nicholas left quietly. Evelyn stood at the window, watching rain droplets race down the glass, wondering if the storm inside her heart would ever subside, and which path would emerge when the clouds finally cleared. The next day, Evelyn headed to Sinclair Ventures with her final design proposals. Though her conversation with Nicholas still weighed heavily on her mind, she forced herself to focus on the work. Alexander greeted her with his usual confident warmth, leading her into a conference room where a few key investors waited. She presented each page of her design concepts, color palettes, thematic inspiration, and innovative layouts that maximized both luxury and comfort. Applause filled the room as she concluded. One of the major investors, Kevin Davenport, a well-known property tycoon, stood and offered his hand. "Impressive, Ms. Martin. I look forward to seeing these concepts come to life." Alexander beamed, clearly proud of her success. But as the others filtered out, he closed the door behind them, leaving the two of them alone. "Evelyn, you've outdone yourself. I knew you were talented, but this is groundbreaking." She felt her cheeks flush at the praise. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a gentle tone. "If you're free tonight, I'd love to take you to that lodge I mentioned. We can celebrate and maybe talk about us." Evelyn's heart pounded. She knew exactly what he meant by "talk about us," and she also knew this might be the moment to either fully step into a future with Alexander or step back for good. "All right," she said softly, though her mind was a haze of uncertainty. That evening they drove to a secluded lodge nestled by a serene lake under a canopy of tall pines. The crackling fireplace cast a warm glow, and the faint scent of cedar and pine needles created an ambience of rustic comfort. Alexander had arranged a private dining area overlooking the water. They ate and talked freely about travel dreams, favorite childhood memories, the meaning of success. He leaned in, eyes shimmering, and reached for her hand. "Evelyn, I care about you, he began. I'm not asking you to rush into anything, but I want you to know I see a future with you. One where we build our dreams together, where we combine my resources and your talent to create something incredible. Her heart raced. There it was, the promise of a new life, a life filled with opportunities, financial security, and a man who respected her gifts. She thought about Nicholas, about the years they'd shared, the pain he'd caused, the regrets he harbored. Could he truly change? Was a second chance even possible? Or would bitterness always fester beneath the surface? Tears welled in her eyes. Alexander's face fell slightly, concern evident. Did I say something wrong? He asked gently. She shook her head. No, it's just, I've been through so much heartache. I'm scared to trust again. He stood and wrapped her in a comforting embrace. I understand, but I promise to be patient. No matter what you decide, your happiness is my priority. As she closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and his subtle cologne, Evelyn knew she was on the cusp of the biggest decision of her life. She could continue on this new path, building a future with Alexander, or she could attempt to heal the wounds of her marriage, offering Nicholas one last shot at redemption. The question weighed heavily in her mind, demanding an answer she wasn't sure she possessed. A sleepless night led to a foggy morning. Evelyn stood by the lodge's lake at dawn, watching the first rays of sunlight dance on the water's surface. She felt Alexander's gentle presence behind her, but he gave her space. He seemed to understand that she needed to think, truly think, about what she wanted. By noon, they headed back to Oakwood Hills. Alexander, sensing her mood, didn't press the issue. He dropped her off at Rebecca's, giving her a tender kiss on the cheek. Take all the time you need, he said before driving off. Evelyn lingered in the driveway, letting the stillness clarify her thoughts. Finally, she went inside, packed a small overnight bag, and drove to the outskirts of town, where her old marital home stood. It felt surreal, returning to the place she once shared with Nicholas. The front lawn was overgrown, and the porch light was busted, but the memories clung to every corner of the property. Nicholas answered the door with surprise etched on his face. "Evelyn," he breathed. "Is everything all right?" She stepped in, steeling herself. "We need to talk." He led her to the living room, the same room where they'd once celebrated Christmases and birthdays, the same room where the first seeds of their love had grown. She noticed the walls were emptier, some photos taken down, boxes stacked, as if he wasn't sure whether to move or stay. "I came here to settle this," she said, her voice wavering. "You've said you've changed. You say you love me, and I admit, part of me still loves you. But trust isn't something that magically reappears just because we say we're sorry. It has to be earned." Nicholas swallowed hard. "I know. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." She took a deep breath. She thought of the warm glow of Alexander's penthouse, the way he valued her talent, the endless potential for growth at his side, and she thought of the stormy night with Nicholas, his vulnerability, the weight of their shared past. "I can't live in two worlds," she whispered. "I have to choose." The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Nicholas's eyes were filled with both fear and hope, but Evelyn's heart, though torn, had quietly made its decision. She turned her gaze downward. "I need a fresh start, Nicholas. I forgive you because I can't carry hate anymore. But we're not the same people we were. The trust we had, it died the night you were unfaithful, and I've started building something new for myself, something I can't abandon." Tears streaked Nicholas's cheeks. "Evelyn, She silenced him gently, placing a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry. I'm choosing my future, a future that doesn't include this marriage." Nicholas's face crumpled in heartbreak. "You deserve happiness," he finally managed, voice quivering. Evelyn stood, tears in her own eyes. She leaned in and gave him one last tender kiss on the forehead, a farewell to what they'd once been. Then she slipped off her wedding band and set it on the coffee table, a symbolic end to their union. She turned and walked out, leaving the ghosts of her past behind. As she drove away, sorrow and relief mingled in her heart. She was free now to embrace the life and perhaps the love that awaited her. And in that mixture of pain and promise, Evelyn Martin discovered her true path forward. Evelyn's journey teaches us that love can spark in the unlikeliest of moments, and sometimes we must choose ourselves, no matter how painful it might be. Nicholas's heartbreak might be a cautionary tale of how a single moment of betrayal can destroy a lifetime of devotion, but it's also a reminder that heartbreak can lead to growth. Meanwhile, Alexander's unwavering support, his genuine appreciation for Evelyn's talent and dreams, shows us the power of a love that nurtures rather than undermines. If you found yourself caught up in this emotional roller coaster and want to dive into more stories of love, betrayal, and second chances, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more captivating tales to keep you entertained, inspired, and hopeful for what love can truly become. Thank you for watching.